Good morning and welcome to the Easter edition of Stories for the Cooped Up Captive and Otherwise Bored Out of Their Mind. I had intended to film at sunrise today. However, I messed up the introduction a couple of times, so this is about the third or fourth take, and our 27-year-old cat named Kiki decided it was breakfast time. Kiki is not to be denied. Well, today's story is about gratitude. It seems appropriate, and I'm going to give you a prompt. Early on, there's a reference to a funeral that took place a few years ago. Well, the funeral that day, the man whose life we celebrated, the man whose life we mourned, is a man named Dick Bass. And Dick Bass has affected nearly every human interaction I've had in the past 25 years. And on Tuesday, I'm going to tell a story about him. I'd invite you to tune in. In the meantime, here's my story about gratitude. So in 25 years as a veterinarian, I have pushed the plunger on dogs and cats and cows and horses who were their owner's soul and salvation. Sounds like a rather sobering notion if you let it be. However, when the time is nigh, whether it be at my dad's dying bedside or at the funeral of my friend, the amazing Dick Bass at the Cog Creek Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, I open my eyes and my ears and my pores and my soul so that I can absorb everything that is right and strong and beautiful about that moment. In doing so, I have adopted large parts of my being, and I have come by an appreciation for a group of people. I'd like to tell you about 6 of them. Of my mom, my dad would always say, "Son, if a neighbor gets sick, the ambulance better be fast, because otherwise your mom will be there first with a casserole and a pitcher of iced tea." And that was Alma Ann Beasley. She was the kindest, most selfless human being on the planet. She could not put herself first. When she was diagnosed with that god-awful affliction, which is Alzheimer's disease, my get her done till death do us part dad cooked and cleaned and bathed and fed her, gave her every credit for everything she did, and preserved every thread of her dignity until he no longer could. My mom only spent 3 months in a nursing home. By the time she arrived there, she was a 68-pound babbling mannequin. She couldn't tell my dad and I from Garth Brooks and George Strait. At the nursing home, I remember Carol and Jocelyn. Near the end, Mom lost control. She was soiling her bedclothes every few hours. Without complaint, Carol and Jocelyn would roll her up, clean her, bathe her, dry her, give her clean bedclothes, and then kiss her on the temple and wish her good night. After Mom passed, Dad had 10 good years, until one Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock, I got the call from Cousin Jim. Dad was one of those old guys who drove used cars between a dealership and an auction. He'd had a stroke and launched a Buick into a bean field in Indiana. His first night in the hospital was from hell. He had a violent reaction to the morphine. He was dysphoric, he thrashed, he cried out. Repeatedly, he would stand next to the bed and try and eliminate himself. Well, he couldn't even come close to standing, so I'd prop him up on the left. On the right was a diminutive mother of 3 named Omika. Well, after 10 days, Dad managed to get out of the hospital and graduate to a nursing home in Wisconsin. As the nurses arranged for ambulance transport 4 hours north, I pulled my work truck up to the emergency exit of the hospital. The nurses scrambled. They said, "Mr. Stork, you can't do that. What if something happens?" I opened the door and pointed to the commode I had borrowed from St. Benny's in the back seat. I said, "Don't worry about it. We've got it handled. Not to mention, if something happens, in the front seat of this pickup truck is exactly where my dad would want to be." I drove a couple miles out of my way so that he wouldn't have to drive past the house that he would never make it back to. As we drove past the city limits sign for the only home my dad had ever known in 84 years, he just sat and stared straight ahead. I dropped him off at a nursing home and sat him on the edge of a plastic mattress, surrounded by the screams of the demented and the smell of stale urine. He did not have the strength to lift his head, yet still he spoke the strongest words I had ever heard. He said, "Son, I know that you're doing the best you can for us." Well, he went after physical therapy like he was splitting firewood. And after a month, graduated to an assisted living facility. That said, assisted is not exactly living for a retired construction worker. But there are 3 people at Lilac Springs to whom I am eternally grateful. First of all, there was Karen. Karen was 57 years old. She was so racked with arthritis, she walked like a constipated Herman Munster. She looked like a refrigerator with a head. Karen, 4, if not 5 days a week, worked back-to-back 8-hour shifts at 2 different assisted living facilities. Yet repeatedly, after work, I would stop to visit my dad and find Karen sitting by my dad's side, holding his hand, combing his hair, and watching TV with him, after she had clocked out of her 3rd consecutive 16-hour day. Then there was Christy. Christy somehow found out that my dad liked big band and swing music. She had 3 kids and a husband at home, yet she found time to put together a mix CD for him and scare up an old boombox to play in his room for him. And then there was Stephanie. Stephanie was middle-aged, attractive. Her scrubs were always neatly pressed and tucked in. If Stephanie was on shift, things were handled. I was sitting vigil with Dad in the middle of the night in his last few days. He stirred and Stephanie attended. As we worked to settle him, I caught a subtle yawl in her diction, and I asked, "Stephanie, where's home?" Her first answer was Wisconsin, but sensing respect and not judgment, she went on to tell me that she had grown up in Louisiana. At 17 years of age, she was raped and conceived a special needs kid. When she was 20 years old, she loaded her son and her 18-year-old boyfriend in her car and started driving north because she knew there had to be a better way of living somewhere outside of that bayou. So Carol, Jocelyn, Omika, Christy, Karen, and Stephanie are CNAs, certified nursing assistants. In our healthcare system, they are at the bottom of the pecking order in the pay grade. Yet they perform day to day the most dehumanizing, organic jobs for people they never got to know when they were at their best and kind and benevolent, and all for less money than a cashier at Walmart. So, if you are a CNA or if you know a CNA, bless you and thank you. If you ever need a voice, I will tell this story and 10 others in front of Congress and the American Medical Association. Omika put it best. After Dad's night in hell, after he had a stroke, I sought her out to give her a hug and to thank her. She stood back and she said, "Mr. Stork, there ain't nothing. I just want to make sure that every one of my patients gets the exact same care that I would want from my mother." So here on Easter 2020, there's probably a lot of you who have friends and family in those assisted living facilities and you can't go visit them. I just can't imagine the pain. My friend Janet rides her bike to a nursing home every day, knocks on a window, and talks to a friend of hers on the cell phone. I ask you to think about the people on the inside, because there are CNAs, assistants taking care of people who are not able to feed themselves, bathe themselves, or clean themselves. They can't leave their room. They can't even go to the dining hall. So, thank you. Because worse yet, those people, they don't understand. So, strange Easter, happy Easter, and by all means, keep something moving.